Hi everyone, and welcome back to another online lesson for the Germany course. This lesson is going to be the second part of the steps to Fuhrer. How does Hitler become dictator following becoming Chancellor in January 30th, 1933? This lesson will focus on the Night of the Long Knives and then the Army Oath, as well as the death of Hindenburg. Okay, so just to recap from last lesson, and if you are revising this for year 11, then hopefully this will be a nice quick lesson for you. Hitler becomes Chancellor on the 30th of January 1933 after winning the election during the Great Depression following the Wall Street crash. He very quickly passes a decree to allow free and peaceful elections just a few short weeks later. That's going to be on the 5th of March, and remember that allows the police to go into any political meeting and to stop any political meeting if they feel that there is a danger to any Germans. We've talked about the cynicism in that one there too. So very quickly, we can see where this story was going. On the 22nd of February, Goering makes the SA, the brown shirts, part of the police force to, quote, ensure free and peaceful elections. And as we've talked about already, we know what that really meant. And then on the 27th of Feb was the Reichstag fire, where van der Lubbe was caught inside, allegedly, and blamed. He was a communist, and he basically was blamed for a terrorist attack following the sort of, I guess, ironic announcement that Hitler believed there was going to be a communist attack and was going to burst into flames any day, and then of course a terrorist attack by communists burst into flames. Either way, remember, this just got people to be anti-communist, and Hitler then passed some laws, a decree for the protection of the people in the state to arrest communists, and they arrested 4,000 in one night. As well as anything that breaches the peace or anyone who was deemed to be a danger could be arrested and even executed. So that all went really quick, didn't it? And then, of course, we ended last lesson with the Enabling Act, which gave Hitler 4 years of total power to do whatever he wants. And we know that straight away he banned trade unions, all of the parties, etc., etc. So that was a nice straightforward thing. So let's just see where we are and make sure that we're all happy with this. That Hitler has got rid of all the communists, ready for the election that he then wins significantly with 288 seats, but still not the majority, so he makes a deal with the nationalists. And then, of course, they passed the Enabling Act. First act of business is to ban the Social Democrats, who have been the party in power pretty much for most of the Weimar Republic in the last few years. Then all other parties are banned, and then he passes a law to ban all new parties being formed. This is just steps to dictatorship, but of course all is legal thanks to the Enabling Act, and then all the trade unions are banned, and the Nazis now have all government jobs, both nationally and locally. All right, so with all that said, all his political opposition gone, is there any other threat or group that you think might be a danger to Hitler and the Nazis at this point? Just pause the video and write down an answer to that, wherever you do in your notes, a name of a person or people or a group, and then let's see if you are correct. Okay, so there is a political threat. There is a political threat in terms of Hindenburg is still alive. Remember, we ended last lesson discussing that. And there's also an internal threat, actually, a Nazi threat from the SA. And the leader of the SA, Ernst Röhm. All right, so let's just consider this image before we get into today's lesson, into this story. Hitler's going to now have to make a choice, okay? He's going to choose, now that he's ripped up the Treaty of Versailles thanks to the Enabling Act, is he going to side with the army, the German army, that currently is only 100,000, remember, or the SA? Now, the SA around this time has got between 2.5 to 3 million members. Now, they are loyal to Röhm. Now, if you just sort of step back and think logically for a minute, that means that they could potentially do whatever Röhm says. And if Röhm says kill Hitler, then the SA will kill Hitler. So in that sense, maybe Hitler's got a right to be a little bit paranoid. But also the reasons for supporting the army might be useful in terms of getting the people to be on side. So just pause the video and have a read of this little image. Maybe summarize the main bits or an argument perhaps why Hitler should support the army or the SA, and then make a decision on what you think he should do, and obviously justify that. Write a little sentence or two why you think Hitler should choose the army or the SA, because he can't have both. They are going to be a competing factor, aren't they, for control and who's fighting for the country. All right, the SA, remember, are Nazis. They are loyal to the Nazis, where the army are going to be loyal to Germany. So nice little task. Spend as long as you need to on it. When you're ready, unpause the video and you've justified which one you choose, and we'll see what Hitler did in fact do. All right, so remember we have introduced, after the rebrand, when Hitler got out of prison, the SS was set up, the black shirts. Just a little summary of who these guys are. They are the personal bodyguard of Hitler. They have this black uniform, that's why they're called the black shirts. Himmler is its leader. We'll do about Himmler in the next few lessons. He is in control of terror, passing the fear around Germany. If you're revising this in year 11 towards your exams, then you know who Himmler is full well. He arranges the Night of the Long Knives, which is this lesson, and they kill the SA leaders. So straight away now we can see from this, we know what action Hitler chose. He chose to go with the army. During World War II, the black shirts became the death head units in charge of the terror and the camps. And then by 1944, so just as the war is coming to an end, there is about 800,000 members of the SS, the elite squads. All right, you have to be elite to be in the SS. So we've got this entity now in Germany causing terror, fear, paranoia everywhere. And we've also got the brown shirts. Now, the brown shirts have been around since the very beginning of our story. They're violent, they're thugs, remember? Hitler tried to sort of quieten them down a little bit because they were just getting a little bit too aggressive, especially during the ballot not bullet phase of the rise of the Nazis. So we'll call these the stormtroopers or the brown shirts. These are Hitler's personal army, if you like, not quite bodyguards, but people that he sends out, a paramilitary unit, private army, that's what it is, to get rid of political opponents, essentially. They are often members of the Freikorps, so people who were soldiers back in the day, but we know all this, and we know that Ernst Röhm leads the SA, who has been in the Nazi party from the very beginning, right up until the Night of the Long Knives, where Hitler is going to have him killed. Himmler claims that Röhm was planning a coup against Hitler, so Himmler has poisoned Hitler's mind a little bit against his old friend, and he's basically convinced Hitler that Röhm is planning to murder him. There is no evidence for that that I have ever found, and I'm quite confident in that this was basically just Himmler trying to get rid of Röhm and playing on Hitler's own paranoias. After his death, the SA was taken over by Victor Lutz, and the SA gradually loses its power. It sort of hangs around a little bit, but it's got nowhere near the presence that it had. Most of the SA merge into the new Nazi army, and some of them had other jobs within the Gestapo and things like that. So the SA sort of hung on around a little bit, but not to the force that it ever was before. So that's where we are. We now know that Hitler's going to choose the army, but he needs to get rid of these political enemies. All right, so the Reichstag fire you might still think was up there as the main reason for becoming Fuhrer, because he couldn't have done the election results with that, and possibly couldn't have passed the Enabling Act without that. Wouldn't have been able to pass the emergency powers because Germany would not have been under attack. Blah, blah, blah. Now, you might be stuck to that, and by all means do so, it's your opinion. But this is a little sort of, I don't know, a slight problem to that plan, because Röhm could get rid of Hitler. So even though he's politically in complete control of the Reichstag and Parliament, he could be killed by one of his own people. So maybe you'd argue that the Night of the Long Knives is actually more important than those things as well. And that is the joy of this topic. Remember, as we said on the first part, this would be a great section B. All right, one interpretation that Hitler becomes Fuhrer due to the Night of the Long Knives, and the other one due to the Enabling Act. I don't know, something like that. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant answer or topic to do in your exam. And of course, remember the 12 marker, explain why Hitler became Fuhrer. We've got paragraph 1, Reichstag fire, paragraph 2, the Enabling Act, and today's lesson, this one you're watching now, paragraph 3, the Night of the Long Knives. All right, so let's get into a bit more backstory. You're going to be given on the next screen loads of information about Röhm, okay? Looking at these 3 questions, try to find in all of this information 3 reasons why Hitler might not have liked Röhm. Number 2, what impression do you get of Röhm as a leader, as a man? Is he reliable? Was he ever really going to do this to Hitler? Is Himmler the baddie here? And then also, how did his peers view him? So just think about that. Take some time to pause the video on the next screen when all the information is there and answer these 3 questions, because this will give you some real depth and some context to the Night of the Long Knives, and give you some real understanding of why Röhm was so dangerous to Hitler, and maybe even to the point where you might think he wasn't. All right, so here's all the information for that task. Just pause the video because there's lots of stuff to look at there. Work your way through it, looking for evidence to answer one of those 3 questions. When you're ready, unpause the video and we will carry on. Okay, so hopefully you've now got a nice context to Röhm, and you've made an opinion on why you think that he is, of course, a danger or not. So to summarize that stuff, he's the leader of the SA. He is in charge of about 3 million people at this time. Most of them are loyal to Rom before Hitler because he is their leader. And of course, most of them being soldiers. That's just the way of it, isn't it? You're a soldier, you are loyal to your superior. He's always been part of the party from the very beginning. He's probably a little bit left-wing, really. Maybe that's one of the reasons. Hopefully you picked that out. He's a bit more left-leaning, a bit more towards the socialist element of it, not quite the extreme right. And he's quite unpopular with some due to the fact that he's a homosexual and, of course, alcoholic, which goes against this sort of purity and traditional values that a lot of people have. The rumours set up by Himmler that he's going to try and overthrow Hitler and become the leader of the party himself, that's all they ever were, but they were loud and strong enough for Hitler to believe them, hence the Night of the Long Knives. The army, lots of the army dislike Rom and the SA because they feel that he wants to try and take over the army. Rom's priority is the SA, and the soldiers want the army to be the priority, like it always has been for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. And of course, the leaders of the SS, Himmler and Heydrich, they are threatened by the power of the SA. So the SS, the private bodyguards, they're really important and they're powerful and they're dangerous, but they haven't gotten anywhere near the numbers of the SA. So they are a threat to them. So this is a bit of a sort of internal plot, if you like, and if you're watching this in terms of revision and you've been revising the Elizabeth course, this is just like those plots, isn't it, to overthrow a leader. As it is, as we're going to find out, it is Rom who will be overthrown. Okay, and now this chap that you may not remember, Gregor Strasser, the last time we saw Strasser, he was being ousted, kicked out of the party in 1926 at the Bamberg Conference. Because he was a little bit too left-wing for the Nazi party. That's where they moved to the right politically, and Strasser was just too left-wing, too popular. So he was essentially maybe splitting the party internally, but also when it comes to elections and things, people were a bit confused on who they were voting for, but also as he was very popular, he could have, of course, been a threat to Hitler. So Strasser says this, and it's quite a powerful thing to say. It's almost like predicting what's going to happen. He says, "I am a man marked by death. Whatever happens, mark what I say. From now on, Germany is in the hands of an Austrian who is a congenital liar, a former officer who is a pervert, and a club foot." So what we're talking about there is he's talking about Hitler, Rom being a pervert, and Goebbels, who has a physical disability. He's got a club foot. And I tell you this, Gregor Strasser says, the last is the worst of them. This is Satan in human form. So presumably what he's saying here is Goebbels is just Satan is the worst of them all. But he says he's a man marked by death. And that's really interesting because on the Night of the Long Knives, not just Rom is killed, but so is Gregor Strasser. So his prediction for himself does come true. But of course, as he is a political opponent and is popular with many people within the country and within the Nazi party, he had to go as well. So that's second to go. So let's have a little bit of a look at what happened on the night. All right, so this is essentially where a lot of people will argue he becomes the Fuhrer. All competition is removed, but again, you can make up that decision, make up your own mind on that. So he arranged a meeting with Rom and all the other SA leaders to go to Bad Weisse in Germany on the 30th of June 1934. When they arrive, Hitler has them arrested and shot. He burst into Ernst Rom's room and he screams, "You are under arrest, you pig." I think there's a pretty much accepted fact that he was found in bed with a man at the time, but this wasn't a big surprise because everybody knew that Rom was, of course, gay. But this is the start of the end of the SA. Now, as well as Rom and SA leaders, the Night of the Long Knives, if you like, it's like a purge, isn't it? And you understand that from maybe if you've seen the film. But we know that political figures in North Korea, in Russia, and of course probably anywhere, they do purge their leaders. Now, in the West, we generally don't tend to purge our political opponents by murder. We try to, I don't know, persuade people that they're bad or something to get them removed in that sense, but not voted for, but not killed. But when you're in a dictatorship, those rules are a little bit different, aren't they? So we know that Strasser has been killed. He's been removed. Von Schleicher, if you remember him from The Deal, the one who replaced von Papen, he's been killed as well on this night. Von Kahr, back in the Munich Putsch. He was, of course, Hitler, the one who agreed to the Munich Putsch and then went to the police. He was macheted into little bits. He was violently, brutally murdered on this night. There were about 400 people, including 150 senior members of the SA as well. So we can see there's some really key people in our story who have been removed on the 30th of June 1934. Von Papen was also on line to be killed, even though he was the Vice-Chancellor in the deal and all those things. I don't think Hitler ever really fully trusted him. Von Papen escaped by simply not being in the office, just by not being there when the SS arrived. But unfortunately, his staff and his secretary, they were shot because they were there. All right. But it's now clear that that deal that von Papen and Hindenburg were going to control Hitler, that is no longer happening. That plan, that deal, it hasn't worked. And that's where now maybe Hindenburg realizes, oh, no, there's no turning back now. So that's a really good sort of little argument to perhaps you could put in if you're saying that this was the reason for the rise to Fuhrer. Okay, so let's have a little look at a source, because of course if this is going to be section B, we could get a source question. And this is a really famous source, one of the more famous sources from the Nazi course. The title of it is "They Salute with Both Hands Now." So just pause the video and make some annotations or make some notes about what you can see and what you think each part of this source represents. So we're picking out content here, aren't we? Look at everything from the legs to the papers to the, on the top right hand side, to the fact the gun's got smoke coming out of it. Everything you can, see if you can just make a little note of, and then when you come back to the video, we'll have a look and see if you picked out the things that I've picked out. All right, so how useful is this source for an inquiry into the Night of the Long Knives? This was made on the 3rd of July 1934, so we're talking within hours and days of the event. A British cartoon, and it shows Hitler with a smoking gun. The smoking gun, hopefully you've noticed that, represents that it's just been fired and it's in his hands. All right, so we can see some legs that have been shot with this gun. We can probably assume that they are Rom and those people that we've just talked about who were killed on the Night of the Long Knives. The fact that they were talking about saluting with both hands now is basically when you put your hands up because someone's about to shoot you in fear. All right, so the SA is now sort of being brought into this. So this is what hopefully you picked out when you were annotating this yourself or making some notes. The SA are the they. They are now saluting with both hands, not just one because they're scared. In the top right-hand corner is the German army, you could say surrounding the SA, and the SA have now got a choice to merge into them or be killed. The smoking gun we've talked about. Goering, this interior minister, you know, the guy in charge of the police and stuff, he is presented as a god of war with his spear. Essentially, they're saying that he is a warmonger setting up problems. Goebbels is presented by the artist as a little lapdog, sort of cowering behind Hitler. And he's been presented as this sort of silly little looking thing. And then we can see the legs, as we've talked about, Rom and the other leaders, and 4 days after the Night of the Long Knives. Now, on the floor, the pieces of paper, if you notice, now they could be in reference to the Treaty of Versailles. They could be in reference to the Constitution that's now been ripped up, all sorts of things. And probably, however you say it, you would be right in that case if it's in the context of this. So this is a lovely source to get your head around. Hopefully we get something like this that allows us to add loads of own knowledge to what we know happened on the Night of the Long Knives. All right, so when you finish with that, and maybe you want to add some of these to your notes if you missed it out, let's move on and draw a close to this lesson. All right, so this is just some backstories we've already talked about, what it's essentially presenting, so you can pause and read if you want, but we've just mentioned that. Okay, so moving on, how this might fit into our exam. So we know, as your own knowledge needs to be, that Hitler dislikes the SA, they're violent, they're thuggy and things like that. They were useful for a period, but they became too undisciplined or ill-disciplined. They're too strong, too many of them. The army's only got 100,000, where they've got 2 to 3 million. And Hitler's trying to make the Nazis more organised, more structured, less aggressive, more legitimate. Certainly in terms of trying to get into power. Now he's in power, maybe he doesn't even need them at all anymore. All right. He prefers the army because they're disciplined, because they're organised, and because they're well trained. They symbolise strength, don't they? Not thuggery. The message of the army is strong, not ill-disciplined. They're more trustworthy and respected because they're going to take an oath to the country. The strong army would be better for conquering other countries due to their training. The SA, they're only thugs. They may not be so good when you invade other countries. And the army leaders already hate the SA anyway. Hitler disliked Röhm for lots of reasons as well. He's very popular, remember? Hitler feared that he would challenge him and try and take over. Röhm controls the 3 million SA. And he fears the SA are more loyal to Röhm than to Hitler and the Nazi Party. And we've already mentioned the army leaders hate the SA too. And all political leaders pretty much dislike Röhm because he's gay and an alcoholic. So that is just some old knowledge that you need to get your head around to include into any answer. Not all of it, of course, but certainly some of it, depending on the quote that you might pick out. Okay, so just get your head around that. Maybe pause the video and write some of these things down if you want to, but make sure this is your context. This is your contextual own knowledge for any questions on why Hitler ordered the Night of the Long Knives. Right, so then things get a bit messier because Hindenburg dies. Now, I would always argue, and I would say this in class as well, if you were in and you're watching this because you missed the lesson, that Hindenburg, as long as he's alive, could remove Hitler at any time. And maybe that's part of the reason why Hitler is so happy with this event. He's quite pleased looking in this photograph. Now, I don't think he can kill Hindenburg because that is probably so early into the Nazi rule, if you like, just a bit too far to kill this president, who, by the way, remember, is loved and adored by the people. He's a war hero from World War One. He's won the last few elections to remain president. So killing Hindenburg might have just been a little bit too far. But the fact that Hindenburg died naturally of old age, he was an old gentleman, on the 2nd of August, just happy days for Hitler, because the one last political threat to Hitler has now died. So he makes himself now the Fuhrer. What that basically means is he merges the role of Chancellor and the role of President into one, Fuhrer. Now remember, due to the Enabling Act, he can change the Constitution, remember, without anyone opposing this. So it's very straightforward. He's now made himself the Fuhrer, basically President and the Chancellor all in one. So here we are, folks. Hitler is now the Fuhrer. All right, so this image is the probably turning point, and where there is no turning back, really, is Hitler is climbing the stairs in Nuremberg, where the whole of the army are now going to take an oath to him. He merges the SA into the army, and of course he's ripped up the Treaty of Versailles, so he's going to keep adding to this as well. So the army oath is another thing that you might include in your argument. I might include the army oath within this paragraph as well as the Night of the Long Knives, but the Night of the Long Knives has got enough of its own content. But if you are struggling for your third example and a little bit of explanation, this is definitely where there's no going back. So this was the oath that the army had to take. I swear by God, this holy oath, I will render unconditional obedience to Adolf Hitler. Not to Germany, but to Adolf Hitler. That's important. Führer of the German Reich and people, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. Now that's no different from any other country. The monarch in our country is Commander of the Armed Forces, the President in America. But it's interesting that the oath is to Hitler. And I'll be ready as a brave soldier to risk my life at any time for this oath. In other words, you're prepared to die for Hitler. Okay, so that really is the end of our story here in how Hitler becomes the Führer. This bit of the story is really straightforward, isn't it? But you need to put this and part one all together and decide which was the most important reason for him becoming the Führer. And considering it in the terms of section B. Remember, one interpretation, it was the Night of the Long Knives, one, it was the fire, one, it was the army oath, I don't know, whatever it might be, but there'll be two very clear views on why Hitler becomes the Führer. Now, remember with section B, it's not always going to be positive or negative. It could be anything, one thing or other. All right, in this case, it would be one thing or other, and the focus of the topic would be becoming the Führer. So nice and easy, this one, but you've got to put this in terms of everything else. Hitler is now the Führer. Germany is now controlled and is now a dictatorship. And we will now go into the rest of the topic of life in Nazi Germany. And the next couple of lessons, we'll be looking at terror and propaganda, how they scared people into falling into line and how they brainwashed people into getting into line. So that's the end of the Weimar Republic, the end of the early years. Hopefully this made sense. As always, if you've got any questions, ask your teacher. Thank you for listening, and we will see you for the next video. All right, thanks very much, and goodbye.